Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of... Okay,
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick! Plays it in at the buzzer! That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Allsep.
All right, everybody. Welcome into the premiere of Gamecock Pod Live. I am your host, Keith Allsep. This is episode number 1157 of Gamecock Pod Daily and now Gamecock Pod Live for the first time. In just a few minutes, we will be joined by my special guest today, Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast. Can't wait to catch up with him. Lots of burning questions ahead for the SEC and for the Gamecocks. Let's get into some news and notes of the day. Last night, sadly, Gamecock men's basketball dropped a 75-64 decision at home to Vanderbilt. Gamecocks on a 7 or 8 game home losing streak, not the way you wanted to follow up that 64-61 road win at Ole Miss on Saturday. And so not the best of days for the Gamecocks. I mean, you look at it, Vanderbilt went on a 15-0 run after the Gamecocks went up 2-0 early. Vanderbilt now won 4 straight in the SEC for the first time since 2016, 2017. Meechie Johnson led the way with 19 points. It's his 16th game in double figures this year. Hayden Brown scored 11. Chico Carter had 15. For Vanderbilt, they were led by Liam Robbins, who had 24 points. They had 4 other players in double figures. Mangin had 15, Lawrence 11, and Stute had 10. For the Gamecocks, Jacoby Wright just 1 of 6 from the field. Chico Carter 4 of 10 from the field, 3 of 5 for 3. He had 15 points. Meechie Johnson 5 of 14 and 3 of 7 from 3. Also 6 of 6 from the free throw line. This was one of South Carolina's better games from the line, 15 for 18, but just not enough made baskets, particularly from 3. Gamecocks just 7 of 27. And when Vanderbilt was building over a 20-point lead, South Carolina was just jacking up a bunch of threes, and none of them were going in. Gamecocks really trailed by more than 20 most of the way in this one. All right, tomorrow night, South Carolina, number 1 South Carolina, and the only undefeated team in women's college basketball, will host Florida. Gamecocks are 25-0 and 12-0 in the SEC. And tomorrow night at halftime, it's the annual Teddy Bear toss game. So if you're going to the game, make sure to go out and buy a teddy bear or bring a teddy bear. It's pretty neat. At halftime, everybody comes down and tosses the bears onto the court. They have people come up and scoop them up, and they take them and deliver them to kids in hospitals, in children's homes, and elementary schools that don't have teddy bears. And so give an old teddy bear or a new teddy bear a forever home by coming to the game tomorrow night and tossing the teddy bear onto the court. Dawn Staley, one of 15 head coaches on the late season watch list for the Naismith National Coach of the Year. Staley has won that award twice, including last season, and she's also the only person to be named the Naismith National Player of the Year and then the National Coach of the Year. And she's done it twice. She was 2 times National Player of the Year and 2-time Naismith Coach of the Year. So you got that. Camila Cardoso named SEC Player of the Week. The Gamecocks were named by the National Basketball Writers Association as the National Team of the Week. And so here's what's at stake for the Gamecocks right now after that boat racing of LSU. They've got a 38-game home win streak, a 31-game win streak. They won the last 6 to win the national championship. They're 25-0, 27 straight regular season SEC games, 34 consecutive weeks ranked number 1 in the Associated Press poll. That is the 3rd longest streak in the history of the Associated Press women's college basketball. And the Gamecocks and LSU averaged 1.5 million viewers on Super Bowl Sunday on ESPN. You had the Celtics versus Memphis on ABC. The Celtics, the best team in the East, the best record in the NBA. Memphis Grizzlies, number 2 in the West, with South Carolina native Ja Morant, I might add. That NBA game on ABC only got 600,000 more viewers than Carolina women. It was the most watched women's college basketball regular season game since 2010, and I would have to imagine that was UConn and Tennessee. A little football recruiting. Looks like Greenville High School offensive lineman Blake Franks will make his college announcement on Monday, February the 20th, which is his birthday. It's also my childhood first friend, Tom Davis. We were both born in 1964. He was also born on February 20th. He's a Georgia Bulldog fan, so he probably won't be very happy with that announcement. Looks like it's trending towards the Gamecocks, but we're going to let Blake tell us all on Monday. Some recent crystal ball picks for the Gamecocks. Burlington Cummings 4-star wide receiver Jonathan Paylor, one of the fastest players in the Southeast, a guy that can really do it all. Line up in the backfield, play in the slot, play out wide, be a jet sweep guy. Gamecocks are trending for him. Free safety Kelvin Hunter, a high 3-star guy from Florence who's a big hitter. Reminds me of DJ Swearinger, 5'11", 180. He's picked up recent crystal balls for the Gamecocks, as has Dillon High School 4-star offensive tackle and potentially 5-star tackle Josiah Thompson. He will be, or he has been crystal ball to the Gamecocks, as well as Blake Franks. All right, let's get ready and go to our main man, the host of that SEC podcast, Michael W. Bratton. Here he comes right now.
Hey, Keith, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, Michael, how is everything fresh off the vacation? Hope you had a great Valentine's Day yesterday.
Well, I didn't have much of one, to be honest with you, because it's been nonstop putting one fire out after another since I got back home to Nashville. Like you said, I came down to Austin, got to have lunch with you. So that was one of the highlights of my trip down there. But, it's one of those things, Keith, where it's nice to go on vacation, but it's nice to come back home too. So, we're back rocking and rolling now.
Well, that's awesome. So let's jump right in. I mean, it was awesome getting to meet you in person and have lunch, have a couple of toasts with some adult beverages. That's always one of my favorite things to do. And so big news broke within the SEC with Texas and Oklahoma coming into the conference in 2024. The commissioner has said that within 90 days, they're going to have a new scheduling model. Michael, what are you hearing and what do you think about the possibilities for different models? Are we going to stay at 8 games? Is it going to go to 9 games? Are we going to have 1 permanent opponent, 3 permanent opponents? Tell us what you think is getting ready to happen.
Well, Keith, like all things in college athletics in 2023, unfortunately, it all comes down to money. So they will go to a 9-game model with 3 permanents at some point, but it's not a guarantee that some people think it is, because when the SEC, obviously they're breaking away from CBS. This upcoming season, this will be the last year of the SEC on CBS at 3:30 there, 3:30 Eastern, of course, 2:30 Central. Now they're going to ABC, ESPN exclusively. But when they ironed out all those deals, that was before Texas and Oklahoma came into the league. And that was prior to, of course, this anticipated move to a 9-game conference schedule. So why would the SEC agree to, matchups like Alabama versus Texas, Oklahoma versus Georgia, on and on and on, South Carolina versus Oklahoma? I mean, these are marquee matchups that ESPN, ABC is going to be getting, and you just don't give those games away for free, because these are going to be the best games in the country. So ESPN, ABC needs to up what they're willing to pay the SEC, and until that is finalized, the 9-game schedule is not going to be official. So I anticipate they've been working behind the scenes on this for a long time, given the 90-day timeline that you referenced there. I mean, that massive deals like this don't get ironed out that quickly. But if we've been knowing Texas and Oklahoma are coming to the SEC for quite some time. We just weren't officially sure when that is. We do know now, of course. So now that they have a firm timeline, now those conversations can take place. So I do anticipate it being the 9 model with the 3 permanents, but it's not a guarantee that that's what it'll be as soon as Texas and Oklahoma come into the league.
All right. So hypothetically speaking, I mean, we're all looking at different models, different formulas, et cetera. Obviously, there's going to be no more divisions. And so as far as the Gamecocks are concerned, what do you think are their most likely 3 permanent opponents?
I think it'll be Florida and Georgia. I think those are kind of no-brainers for the Gamecocks. And then the third one, I think you could make a case for a couple teams. I think it'll be Missouri. Keep that Battle of Columbia's going. That has been a really good series, Missouri and South Carolina, since Missouri joined the SEC. Certainly you can make the case Kentucky maybe fits there, maybe Vanderbilt as well. But I think once you get past those, I don't think there's many other options that make sense. And you got to remember, it's not just what's good for the Gamecocks. It's good. We have to do 15 other teams, all these moving pieces coming along. But I think the best news, if you're a Gamecock fan, is that annual series against Texas A&M. I mean, that's not going to be surviving it. And again, I know South Carolina just turned the tide in that one, but I mean, that was illogical from the start.
Yeah, I mean, 6-loss Jimbo. I mean,
Maybe
we'll
South
see.
Carolina wants to
mean,
keep that now that Jimbo's the coach,
That's right. I mean, I don't know how many. I mean, he's been 5-loss Jimbo except for the COVID year, right? Like he lost at least 5 games. I mean, South Carolina just beat Texas A&M. He's hired Bobby Petrino. I'm wondering when he's going to come rolling in a neck brace. I wonder if he rode his Harley into College Station with hot young blonde on the back. That should be very interesting.
Yeah, I think Bobby Petrino's got a no motorcycle clause in his contract there, so we may not be seeing. I hope they, have him roll out there on the field in a Harley or something. I don't know if you've ever watched an Oregon game, but they got the mascot does it every game. I'd love to see old Bobby P on one of them.
Maybe they could just put a cadet in a neck brace on a Harley and roll him out with the team when they come out. All right, so I do want to talk more about coaches in the SEC, but I really want to dive in and get your thoughts on South Carolina football. Obviously, year 2 of the Shane Beamer era. They go 8-4 in the regular season this year, which was a big improvement from last year's 6-6. Miraculously, somehow, some way, after scoring 0 offensive points in the Swamp, come back the next Saturday night against number 5 Tennessee and the Heisman frontrunner Hendon Hooker and beat Tennessee 63-38. I mean, first of all, how is cousin Shane holding up? Is he out of rehab? And how is y'all's relationship after that game?
Well, I'll tell you, Keith, I told you this in person. Shane and I watched that game together. That was the last time we watched a football game in person together, and he vows to never watch another Tennessee game with me as long as he lives. But, as he has put it many times since that point, Tennessee will gladly be the signature win for any SEC team. That just goes to show the power of that power T there. Shane Beamer got a contract extension by beating Tennessee. Hey, more power to him. But yeah, that was a butt whooping like I can't remember. I mean, it looked like Alabama back in the day facing Derek Dooley or Butch Jones, the hurting they put on the Volunteers. So I certainly didn't see that coming. I think the point spread was like 20-something points or something crazy like that. And I didn't even think South Carolina would cover the game, not only win it, but win it in such demanding fashion. I don't know where that came from, but hell, had they played as well like that on offense all season long, I think the only team they would have lost to was Georgia.
Well, I mean, I know you've had guests on your show that in last preseason that said, if South Carolina had a good offensive coordinator, they would have picked them to be much better. And so not only you beat Tennessee, Michael, I don't think anybody had Shane Beamer going to Death Valley and Clemson and beating Dabo and the Tigers in year 2. I think that had a lot to do with that big contract extension as well. And, usually when South Carolina first joined the SEC, every year, the last 3 games of the year were Tennessee, Florida, and Clemson. They called it the Orange Crush. But this year it was really Orange Hush because the Gamecocks beat Tennessee and Clemson and then flipped in-state quarterback Lenore Sellers from Syracuse, another Orange school. And so the Gamecocks did pretty well against the Orange to end the season.
Yeah, well, hey, you said no one picked it. I mean, cousin Shane and I, as soon as we saw what they did to Tennessee, by God, we were not going to pick against the Gamecocks again this season. So we picked them to, as improbable as that seemed. What's interesting about that Clemson game, Keith, is I really think, Spencer Rattler had some mistakes in that ball game that, could have cost South Carolina the game. But it's pretty rare that you throw a pick six, you throw an interception on the goal line, and you go on the road and beat a team of Clemson's caliber. Yet the Gamecocks did that because they were just dominant. If not for those two issues and some questionable officiating, I mean, hell, they may have beaten Clemson by 21 points that day. I mean, they made a mockery of Dabo Swinney's team. And if nothing else, I mean, as great as that Tennessee win was, I think that Clemson game was equally as impressive, even though the score was not quite as lopsided as the win over Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about it on the show. Gamecock fans that can remember back to 2006, Spurrier's second year at Clemson, it was just kind of a crazy game. Like South Carolina's driving for a score at the end of the first half, and Blake Mitchell gets hit. He throws the ball. It gets batted up. Jock McKissick catches it and races 88 yards for a touchdown. Spurrier gets impatient the first series of the third quarter and goes for it on fourth down at the 33 and doesn't get it. And the next play, C.J. Spiller scores a touchdown. I mean, there was just a lot of big plays and a lot of mistakes. And, South Carolina could have easily won that game by 21. They wind up winning 31-28. And the only points of the fourth quarter were a field goal, just like in that game. The only difference was, you didn't get the safety call in 2006. But there was some questionable officiating in that game. I thought that was a clear backwards pass that was probably going to be a scoop and score for South Carolina, and they killed it. And then even on replay, they upheld it, which was, I thought, egregious, quite frankly.
Yeah, I'm always impressed by your memory, Keith. I mean, my God, I can't remember what I had for dinner last night. You know what I mean? So I got to go back. That's typically what I do during the off season is just go back and watch every single SEC game. I have them all recorded, but yeah, just like I said, from what I remember, I mean, South Carolina dominated that football game, and that's even with, I think it was like the first possession was a pick six. You go into Clemson, you throw a pick six on maybe it was the second possession, I can't remember, but right out the gate, you throw a pick six, you're thinking, oh, this is going to be a long day. It was a long day for Clemson, is who it was a long day for.
Yeah, I mean, it really was. I mean, you had the pick six, you had the safety, and then you threw an interception in the end zone when it was second and goal from the 1 yard line. I don't know why in the hell Marcus Satterfield just didn't line up and quarterback sneak it like 3 times or four times with DeCarian Joyner under center and, have a big back or a tight end right behind him, just pushing him in, kind of like what the Eagles, their short yardage play. So Gamecocks definitely made their share of mistakes, but Clemson, 2 critical special teams mistakes in that game. Right after the safety, Carolina kicks off on a free kick, and they do the little sugar huddle, and the kicker ends up slinging the guy around, and he fumbles it. Gamecocks get that back. And then at the end of the game, South Carolina's going to have to punt it back to Clemson with under 2 minutes to go. And freshman Antonio Williams, who spurned the Gamecocks right before National Signing Day, Nate Adkins, number 44, he punches it out. And true freshman Nicky Memori, who went to the rival high school, Irmo High School, Williams went to Dutch Fork. They competed against each other. He recovered it, and then Juice Wells sealed it. And Spencer Rattler really changed the narrative with those last 2 games.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say Keith Pete Limbo is not going to copy that sugar huddle anytime soon. You know what?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that was more of Dabo's ego saying, hey, you think you got great special teams? We're going to show you what great special teams are. And they end up having 2 turnovers on special teams, and that was the difference. Shane Beamer has finished up with the highest ranked recruiting class in the rankings era for 24/7 Sports. You know, Michael, it used to be back in the day, there was only one signing day, and it was on February. And so you had a lot of huge decisions. This past year, the December signing period, I don't know what the NCAA was thinking. Of course, half the time we never do. But they had the darn thing after school was out. And so all these kids that are seniors that are wanting to make their announcements at school in a packed gymnasium with all their friends and family, school's out. And so February 1st was National Signing Day. There were several big decisions, but the biggest one was from 5-star athlete and probably future track Olympian Nicholas Harbor. He chooses the Gamecock. That's the first 5-star signing by Shane Beamer. Just what was the impact, in your opinion, of that with the Gamecocks winning the day with the biggest decision on National Signing Day?
Yeah, I mean, it was just a continuation. We talk about the wins over Tennessee and Clemson. It's just a continuation of that momentum into the offseason. And this is second year in a row. I'm thinking back to the big bowl win over North Carolina that the Gamecocks had a ton of momentum. And Shane Beamer capitalized off the first one. He certainly capitalized off the second one. So, yeah, I mean, I declared South Carolina the biggest winners of the national signing period because of that and everything that went with landing an elite prospect on national television. That was the highest profile commitment during the February signing period. So, again, South Carolina, yeah, I mean, I heard from some people, Alabama got 7 of those guys. Well, that's great, but at South Carolina, you land a player of that caliber. If he lives up to the hype, I mean, this is a guy that can close the gap with a team like Georgia with, you've already closed it with Clemson, but being competitive with them year in, year out, this is how you do it. You do it through recruiting. So just a massive, massive win for Shane Beamer and company. And I just can't wait to see how to utilize him in this offense.
No doubt. So, hey, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back with Michael W. Bratton. More coming up right after this.
If you enjoy listening and watching the Free Wednesday show, now live streaming on YouTube, and would love more Gamecock Pod daily, join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual subscriber. You'll be able to listen to the show every day of the week and listen to guests like J.C. Sherbert, Hale McGranahan, and John Whittle from thebigspur.com, Colin Taylor and Mike Yuva from Gamecock Central, Emily Adams from the Greenville News, Ben Portnoy, Michael Lanana, and Jeremiah Holloway from GoGamecocks.com, Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast, and many, many more. As a VIP subscriber, you can join or listen to the weekly live Zoom call with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. After the show is an unrecorded overtime segment where the real scoop gets dropped and discussed. It's like going down to your local pub or sports bar and having a conversation with your Gamecock friends about last week's football game, men's and women's basketball games, and Gamecock baseball. And of course, there's always recruiting to discuss. In addition to the weekly Zoom call, VIP subscribers get the most popular podcast, The Morning After, which is released every Sunday morning during football season, and more VIP perks are in the works. Follow Keith on Twitter @KAllset, or follow the show on Twitter @GamecockPod. Go to the top of the homepage and follow the link. If all else fails, go to patreon.com/GamecockPodDaily. Join now and get up to 3 months free off an annual VIP subscription. You will love it, guaranteed. Now, back to Gamecock Pod Live.
All right. So we are back. And so that weekly Zoom call is called the Garnet and Black Town Hall. And it is just like being down at a sports bar with your favorite Gamecocks and friends and swapping stories and griping and complaining and sharing in the jubilation of big wins. But right there from the privacy of your own home. So sign up today. All right. Back to Michael W. Bratton, the host of that SEC podcast, the dean of SEC podcasts. So, Michael, not only did South Carolina boat race Tennessee, not only did they basically crap in Dabo's stew at Death Valley by beating Clemson, knocking both of those teams out of the college football playoff, but they also lost Marcus Satterfield, who went to Nebraska with Matt Rule. That may have been the biggest win for a lot of fans and analysts around the SEC. They bring in Dowell Loggins from Arkansas, a guy who is really beloved by Arkansas, and you really had two upset fan bases. You had a lot of fans in Arkansas upset because they wanted him to replace Kendall Briles. And then you had a lot of upset Gamecocks because they thought they were going to get Kendall Briles or Garrett Riley. And now Garrett Riley's at Clemson and Kendall Briles is at TCU. And so what are your thoughts on the Dowell Loggins hire? To me, I think he's eminently more qualified to run an offense than Marcus Satterfield.
Well, I mean, I just tell how I see it, Keith. I try to be honest. Otherwise, I feel like you lose credibility. I feel like that Dow Loggins hire is the biggest question mark that I have with South Carolina. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm saying he's bad, even though hell, it wasn't me saying it. I think it was CBS or 24/7 or something like that. They called him the worst offensive coordinator in the NFL at one point in time. And his numbers were pretty pathetic in the NFL. Now, I didn't watch those teams. I don't know much about them. I know that he was saddled with very, very, very poor quarterback play. And I think anybody that watches NFL knows it's just such a quarterback-driven league. I mean, heck, even the New England Patriots fell off a cliff when Tom Brady left. So I don't necessarily hold that against him. And I also don't think that someone that struggles at the NFL means they can't be successful in college football. I mean, we've seen it so many times. And I think the best example that I use all the time is Mel Tucker. He was, I mean, just god awful as a defensive coordinator with the Chicago Bears. I'm a Packers fan, so I watch a lot of Packers football. And when Mel Tucker was the defensive coordinator, it was, I mean, Aaron Rodgers was putting up 50, 60 points per game. It was pathetic. Gets hired down there at Georgia for Kirby Smart. I thought it was a joke. I thought that was a terrible hire. They were great. And of course, now Mel Tucker's making $100 million being Michigan State head coach. So I say all that to say struggles in the NFL does not mean that you're going to be a failure at the college level. But, you know, it is a mystery. I mean, he's not called plays in college. And I mean, there's people that are successful in the NFL that can't coach in college. So how this all plays out, it's going to be fascinating. But I'm right there with you. I mean, dropping Marcus Satterfield, I literally don't know how you can downgrade from that. So it's almost like this is an automatic upgrade, even if it's just a slight upgrade, which I'm not saying it will be, because it is true. I mean, Kentucky looked at him. A&M looked at him. I think a couple others in the Shane Beamer was very, very clear that many SEC programs were in on Dow Loggins. So, hey, I mean, you got to have faith in Shane Beamer. I think I didn't know who Clayton White was when they hired him. I certainly didn't know who Pete Lembo was. And Pete Lembo is the best special teams coach in the country. So I'm kind of trusting Shane Beamer here. And the fact that Juice Wells and Spencer Rattler both decided to come back when they could have made the leap to the NFL, I think that gives you an indication of just their level of respect for Dow Loggins, even after just knowing him for a brief period of time.
Yeah, so I agree. So I don't know if you've ever seen that graphic where Dow Loggins was rated number 32, dead last of play callers in the NFL, but the name right above him at number 31 was Kyle Shanahan. So, look, I said the same thing. I kind of thought maybe in recruiting, and Dow Loggins has proven in a short time to be a really good recruiter, both at Arkansas and at South Carolina. I kind of thought you were kicking the can down the road because that was the big question with Marcus Satterfield. Wide receivers were just not going to come play for him because it was more about personnel groupings and I think really just getting as many plays on tape as possible for him to, be auditioning for an NFL offensive coordinator job. I mean, you were literally having 100 plays on the play sheet with 15 personnel groupings. And then the dude's trying to put in 10 more plays at walkthroughs on Friday. I mean, in college, that is just not a formula for success. And that's what gives me hope in Dow Loggins because he coached a long time in the National Football League, but, he spent one season at Penn State with Mike Yurcich as an offensive analyst, and then the last 2 years at Arkansas with Sam Pittman, who coached offensive line in the National Football League. And he understands, after being in the NFL, the workload and the amount of time that goes into being able to master that versus basically 15 hours a week in college. And that was one of the first things he talked about was, simplifying the language of the plays, not having, the John Gruden quarterback on ESPN where they got 15 word plays, and streamlining the offense and building it around the players, which is really coaching 101. Not just throwing out 15 different personnel groupings and 100 plays.
Right. And I mean, I don't have to tell you, Keith. I mean, it seemed like I don't want to say a weekly issue, but very interesting comments from Spencer Rattler after a couple of games. It was, Jaheim Bell not being a factor for whatever reason, but there was clearly some frustration there with I don't know how you don't get that guy the ball, but it is what it is. But clearly the players were at times very unhappy with what they were doing in that offense as well, which is another bad sign given that the culture, despite what Mark Stoops says, the culture being so strong there in Columbia.
Yeah, I think little Stoopsy, that's what we call him. That's what Steve Spurrier probably calls him. Yeah, well, old little Stoopsy at Kentucky. I mean, you never know when a stupid-looking pair of sunglasses could come in handy. So we won't relitigate that. All right, so obviously there was a number of coaching changes in the SEC, a lot of new coordinator positions. And so I wanted to get your take on that. And so front and center there, the Pirate, Mike Leach. I mean, just tragic for, the SEC, for all of college football, for his family in particular and his players. And so Mississippi State acted quickly and promoted Zach Arnett. And Zach Arnett, I guess he brought in Kevin Barbay, who had been very successful at Appalachian State, and then he was the defensive coordinator. He promoted his linebacker coach, Matt Brock, there at Mississippi State. And so obviously a play calling legend gone. I mean, that's like losing a Steve Spurrier, kind of deal. Your thoughts on Zach Arnett's elevation and then his coordinators for the upcoming season?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mississippi State, maybe it might seem a little disrespectful, but I think it's the truth. I don't think they really had much of an option other than promoting Zach Arnett, given the tragedy, given the timeline, and they were, I mean, weeks away from a bowl game, weeks away from the signing period, in the middle of the transfer portal. I mean, it was just so much going on. It's almost like you had to go with an internal candidate. But again, that is not being said to slight Zach Arnett, because anybody that watched Mississippi State the last couple of seasons realize what an incredible job he's been doing. And hey, you'll never catch me saying a bad word about the Pirate. We got his book here for a reason. He's just an all-timer, a legend, should be in the College Football Hall of Fame. If he's not qualified, then they shouldn't even have a damn College Football Hall of Fame. But also, that being said, I mean, Mississippi State's offense had been kind of inconsistent the last two seasons, and particularly this season. They had an opportunity, I think, to win games like LSU. They should have won that one. Kentucky, I believe it was, came out of nowhere. They were a favorite, and they lost that game. And a lot of that had to do with the offense being up and down. And this was with a solid quarterback and plenty of receivers and two quality running backs. So I like the moves that Zach Arnett has made. He essentially blew up the offensive side of the ball and keeping his defensive system in place, which has been so successful. And you saw after the season, the players that were leaving were on the offensive side of the ball. Many of the defensive players, the key ones, all decided to come back outside of their outstanding cornerback, Emmanuel Forbes, who he's the all-time leader in SEC pick six. He's going to be a top, probably first or second round pick in the upcoming NFL draft. Aside from him, they bring back nearly everybody on defense. They've added via the transfer portal some very talented prospects, one from Miami and the other one from I think LSU. So I mean they have upgraded the talent there in the secondary. That's what they needed to do. I think they'll be good on the defensive side of the ball. Kevin Barbay, the guy you mentioned, the offensive coordinator, specializes in explosive passing, and that's kind of been the critique of the Mississippi State offense under Mike Leach. A little too dink and dunk, and maybe that's just part of the system. That's kind of what they had to do, but not pushing the ball down the field has been an issue. Appalachian State, top 20 explosive passing attack in the country. If they can add that wrinkle, Mississippi State could be a dangerous team. And heck, they always are. They're always disrespected, always picked 6th or 7th in the West, always finish better than that. It is I don't want to say a leap of faith, because the guy's never been a head coach. He's been an outstanding defensive coordinator, doesn't have a ton of strong ties to the SEC region, being he was a disciple of Rocky Long out there at San Diego State, but he's done a hell of a job recruiting, keeping that class together. They got the top in-state defensive back over Ole Miss. So, early signs are that Mississippi State made the right decision promoting Zach Arnett.
And Kevin Barbay already has an SEC win in College Station and Kyle Field. They just ran it right up Jimbo's hind parts. All right, so the most recent change was at Georgia, where you got the three amigos now, Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp, and Mike Bobo. It's kind of like a scene from The Hangover when Zach is in the back singing, we're the three best friends anyone could ever have. And so the gang's all back together. Todd Monken's off to the NFL. Mike Bobo promoted at Georgia. And no quarterbacks who have thrown a pass in a meaningful college football game. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's undoubtedly it's a downgrade, but that is not to slight Mike Bobo. That's more of a compliment to Todd Monken, he just did an outstanding job. I think he did better than I thought he'd do. And I mean, how can you criticize him given what Stetson Bennett just did in back-to-back seasons, winning the national championship. I realize it's a defensive-first program, but the way they've gotten Brock Bowers involved in multiple aspects, A.D. Mitchell has emerged as a big well, of course, now he's at Texas, but during his time at Georgia, when he was on the field, special talent, getting the running backs involved the way they have. I mean, I think Stetson Bennett, hell, I had him as the 10th best quarterback in the SEC going into the year. He was a Heisman finalist. So all that being said, I mean, Todd Monken did an outstanding job, the best hire Kirby Smart has ever made. But I don't get the critiques of Mike Bobo. I really don't. And maybe I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, Keith. But I thought he did a good job for South Carolina. I mean, the quarterback was Colin Hill, I think. I mean, that guy was awful. They had one receiver, if memory serves, Shi Smith. Everyone else was awful. And, I mean, they had an outstanding running game with Kevin
Harris.
Kevin
Led the
Harris,
SEC in rushing.
I mean, he was outstanding. And then, Beamer comes in there. And again, we're not saying anything bad about Shane Beamer, but, then they couldn't run the ball. And all of a sudden, the offensive line was terrible. They couldn't get any push going. These were the same players. And I think you could say the same thing against – they hold Auburn struggles against Mike Bobo. I don't get that either. I think it's just people either they just don't follow this or I don't know what it is, but you got to go back to Mike Bobo's only season there at Auburn. Auburn controlled their own destiny heading into November in the SEC West, who most people recognize as the toughest division of football. It all came unraveled when they were up by 25 points against Mississippi State. Mississippi State come back and beat them, and it was because the defense couldn't stop them. So that's on Bobo. Against Alabama, had Tank Bigsby not run out of bounds, they would have beat Alabama. That's all Mike Bobo. I mean, I don't get what people are thinking. And also, Bo Nix got hurt in that Mississippi State game. People forget that. He was out for the rest of the season, never played for Auburn again. They had to go with TJ Finley, who's just awful. And
God awful.
We saw what Auburn was on offense last year with Mike Bobo gone from the program. So I think Mike Bobo is a very, very good coordinator. And I always say this, Keith. I mean, I think the players matter more than the coaches. And that's not to disrespect the coaches. Coaches are very important. Will Muschamp couldn't win for a reason. I'm not a very good coach. But at the same time, the players matter more than the coaches, in my opinion. I think that's been proven. And at Georgia, he's going to have more talent than anybody he lines up against. And it's really just don't screw it up if you're Mike Bobo.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think Mike Bobo's a great play caller. He had Georgia's offense in his first stint there in the top 10 in the country. And look, he only had one NFL quarterback the entire time he was at Georgia. That was Matthew Stafford. He had some guys that were just not going to play at the next level, and they put up big-time numbers at Georgia. And I agree with you and Bob Davie. It's more about the Jimmies and Joes than the X's and O's. Probably the only two exceptions are Dean Smith, who was the only coach to ever hold Michael Jordan under 20 points a game, and Marcus Satterfield, who did absolutely nothing for Spencer Rattler. So, all right, so what about Alabama? For whatever reason, Bill O'Brien goes back to the NFL, and I think Nick Saban was probably ready to make a change at that defensive coordinator position, so that guy shuffles off and it stays one step ahead of the posse and goes to Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin. And I was very impressed with Tommy Rees in the Gator Bowl. He found Waldo, so to speak. Every weakness, South Carolina was down several starters. They put in a sub at linebacker. He runs a back out of the backfield for a swing pass. The guy goes 75 yards for a touchdown. They make a sub in the secondary, and they go right at that guy with the tight end down the middle of the field. They were just really good. I thought. And so then you bring back Kevin Steele. And I kind of think this is the only place in the country where the head coach doesn't really have to watch his back for Kevin Steele pulling out a knife and trying to stick it right between his shoulder blades to get the head coaching job. Your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kevin Steele's the defensive coordinator just because they couldn't get Jeremy Pruitt. And I'm just sitting here shaking my head. Why is that the case at Alabama with college football's greatest coach of all time? Now, he may not be the greatest right now, but if he's not, he's 2 or 3, and they got all the resources in the world. And I got respect for Kevin Steele. He's had a ton of great defenses. He's one of the good old boys in the SEC. I think that's another reason he's down there. Knows, every elite high school program and all the coaches. I mean, he's well connected. He'll do fine down there, but it was a train wreck at Miami in his 1 year there. And he had taken, I think, the Maryland job for a week, and then he's down there at Miami. That maybe says more about Miami than anything else, because I think they've about cleaned their entire staff after one season. I don't know what the heck's going on down there. But again, I just don't understand why Nick Saban and Alabama's in a place where we got to settle at defensive coordinator. And I think they really settled at offensive coordinator. I mean, Tommy Rees, I mean, it's I thought the goal was to catch Georgia. It seems like the goal is to catch LSU and find out what Brian Kelly's doing down there, because I just thought that was a complete head scratcher. I said that's how I knew the dynasty was dead, because I don't think this guy's going to get it done. I mean, they're going to be ground and pound. Maybe that saves their defense. Maybe that does catch them back up to Georgia, so the defense is not facing so many reps. But I don't know. I'm just not a fan of it. Notre Dame's not an elite offensive team, and I get it. They don't necessarily have elite skill talent, but that's not stopped other teams like TCU from being elite on the offensive side of the ball. Clearly, Nick Saban tried to hire a couple other guys before he got all the way down his list to Tommy Rees. I think it says a little something about coaches and their desire to go coach for Nick Saban, where nowadays you can make a ton of money at a lot of institutions. So, it used to be coaching rehab down there. Now, again, I thought that's why we were getting rid of Pete Golding, is because we had to coach him up at this level. Now they're going to have to be coaching up Tommy Rees. I don't know. I'm not a fan of that one.
Well, I guess I like Rees. I think when you look at Alabama's offense, particularly this past season, they just could not run the ball, especially on first down. And, Georgia, they run the football. LSU, they run the football. Alabama, prior to Steve Sarkisian and all those NFL wide receivers, they built their offense around running the football. And I think Nick Saban's trying to get back some of that identity of being able to be more successful running the football, especially on first or second down, so you're not in 3rd and 10 and, whoever the quarterback is always running for his life because they can't run the football. And so I kind of do see, and look, clearly Tommy Rees was not the first choice for that job, but I do think he is a guy that has a pedigree under Brian Kelly of being able to successfully run the football. And so that's why I like that hire. Now we'll see how imaginative and how creative he is, because, it's not going to look like Sonny Dykes' offense, which to me, until they ran into Georgia, and I really thought TCU lost that game before it ever started because their players looked like they were scared to death after they just beat Michigan, who had boat raced Ohio State. It will be interesting because now Alabama is going to be having a changing of the guard at quarterback. And clearly the guy that replaced Bryce Young was a lot more of a running quarterback than he was a passing quarterback. And so I think it's going to be a huge adjustment for Alabama, and maybe they better be able to run the football next year.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another question. Who the quarterback is will dictate what they're trying to do. I think it's going to be Ty Simpson, former 5-star from West Tennessee. It's an incredible prospect. My money's on him, but could be anybody, and who knows? There could be another guy enter the portal after spring that Alabama has its sets its targets on. But that's a dangerous proposition at times as well.
No doubt. So quickly, your thoughts on Auburn? Barry Odom gets a head coaching job. They go and get former Auburn linebacker and Spring Valley High School in Columbia, South Carolina linebacker Travis Williams from Central Florida to be the defensive coordinator, replace Odom. And then Kendall Briles, he leaves Arkansas for TCU, and Sam Pittman didn't waste any time at all going up to Maryland and getting Dan Enos. I think the Pitt boss may have quietly upgraded, particularly at offensive coordinator. You know, the Philadelphia Eagles staff, they came and spent a great deal of time with Dan Enos putting in that package that made Jalen Hurts the front runner for the MVP in the National Football League until he got injured.
Yeah, and Enos has already compared his new quarterback, KJ Jefferson, to Jalen Hurts. So that's interesting. I think KJ, I mean, he's a great player. I think he's the best quarterback in the SEC coming back. It'll be interesting to see how he fits in this system, how well they adapt to his skill set. But I think it'll be good for him because the entire time he's been under Kendall Briles' system, and it's been a very successful system. I didn't really get a lot of the criticisms of Kendall Briles, but this year certainly, issues in the red zone were at times an issue. I don't know if that's more offensive line or more Kendall Briles, but certainly I think we're at a crossroads with Sam Pittman. I think the loss of Barry Odom is huge, and that's another fascinating one. I mean, fans are just out, Keith. I mean, my God, we lose a couple secondary players and we can't stop anybody. All of a sudden, Barry Odom sucks. Well, he won you the Texas game. He's won you the Ole Miss game. I mean, they've won some big games. LSU, due in large part to that defense and Barry Odom's ability. I've said it. I'm contradicting myself a little bit. Players matter more than coaches, but at times these coaches can really elevate their unit. So I think we're taking a step back from the X's and O's. But if I'm fired up if I'm an Arkansas fan because Travis Williams may be the best recruiting assistant coach in all the SEC. So if they can upgrade the talent, maybe that will be a little bit of a wash there. But hey, last time Dan Enos and Sam Pittman were on the same staff, Arkansas had an incredibly efficient offense. They were actually the number one most efficient offense in the country, that's hard to believe, but it's true. And this is not me saying it. This is Football Outsiders. So, if they can rekindle some of that magic, they got the quarterback. They've got an outstanding running back in Rocket Sanders. You got to have confidence in Sam Pittman. They are replacing some offensive linemen, but I mean, he's the offensive lineman guru down there. As long as that continues to be a strength, you could be right. Arkansas could be getting better on that offensive side of the ball. But much like we say with Dow Loggins, to me, I wouldn't call Travis Williams a mystery because he's been in the SEC. He's been a coordinator at Central Florida, which had a really good defense efficiency-wise last season. If they can carry that over to Arkansas, maybe they have upgraded. But again, I'm not willing to go quite that far just yet.
All right, Michael, great stuff. Tell us what you've got coming up for the rest of this week on that SEC podcast.
Well, just trying to get through the off season. I mean, this is the worst time of the year. Try to fight off the depression. Not really, because I got an easy job here, but we're talking a lot of Texas and Oklahoma. Obviously, that's a hot topic right now. Got some in-person guests coming very soon to the show. Always a good time to have some people on. I think we're going to go around the SEC, have a couple other guests to finish this week, but really looking forward to. We're a little ways out, but the SEC basketball tournament, I'm not even a basketball guy, but it's in Nashville. I live here, and we have so many great beat writers and everything coming through that we'll actually have them coming through in the studio in person to talk. And like I said, those are always my favorite interviews. So those will be coming out around tournament time.
All right, great stuff, Michael. I can't thank you enough for joining us on the first episode of Gamecock Pod Live. And we'll certainly look forward to circling back around and catching up with you down the road. Have a fantastic rest of the week. And again, great stuff as always. Coming in hot, Michael W. Bratton, the host of that SEC podcast.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
Absolutely. All right, so that is going to be a wrap on today's show. We'll be back on Thursday, and then on Friday, my guest will be Bryson Sumter from the Gamecock Basketball Only podcast, so be sure to check that out. And this will go up on the YouTube page. I know we weren't streaming live on Utah. I'm kind of on YouTube. I'm kind of technologically challenged. That's my bad. But we'll be back next Wednesday, and my guest will be 24/7 Sports National College football writer Brad Crawford. Looking forward to catching up with him. So until next time, this has been Keith Allsep, and this is Gamecock Pod Live.